Good evening. Oh, good afternoon. Yeah, it's 2 o'clock. Let me turn myself on the ears. Let's see here. There we go. Welcome to another experience of World of Akibaland, uh, understanding African spirituality. World of Akibaland, understanding African spirituality. I am the two most powerful things, words in the universe, because after that you enter into your God realm because you're able to manifest when you say the words I am. I am the Malakio. I am the seeker. I am not the expert. However, I am the seeker of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and I share what I learn. It's what I do. If there are 4,200 African tribes in Africa, about that number, there are 42 different ways of viewing spirituality. There is no word in Africa that defines religion as something they do. Spirituality is just who they are. And so, again, we're trying to understand who we are as a people, not just what we did in our past and our history, but who were the people in terms of how they viewed themselves in their relationship to God and the Creator. Now, when I first joined my church community, as you grow up or mature in your understanding of how you exist in the realm of God and how God is and how black people are and the history of us as a people, um, we're asked to do certain readings. We have classes, lessons. It's not just you come to church and you just go to church. No, it's a journey to transformation, a journey to becoming what God has called you to be. It's a journey of education and of surrendering to something greater than you. It's a journey. And so a part of that journey we were asked to when we first, especially when we seek in leadership, we were asked to read this book. And so this particular book is the book of a book that helps define the premises of a generalization of African spirituality. Now, um, one of the things that in this book that we've learned, and we've learned that, it said that if you're studying Africa, when this book was written, John Mbiti said, you have to, when you're looking to study African history, you got to find a sympathetic ear, meaning that you got to find somebody who loves African culture, tradition, and what they've contributed to the world, where they're not trying to denounce the power of an African people, but trying to uplift the first major civilizations on the planet. And if you were a part of the African history class, you know that major African societies and empires existed and lasted over 30,000 years. That's a long time to be a first world country. So you're dealing with Kush, you're dealing with Ghana, the Ghanaian ancient Ghana society. You're dealing with Kemet. 30,000 years of influence on the world. So all the world knew of Africa. That's how they were able to take it over. All European world was like, look, we might as well just take them over. But this was something that uh, we had to embark on in terms of understanding who we are. Not who we were, but who we are. Because the world we live in will make you think that you were nothing. But we are some of the most powerful people that ever walked the planet, especially when we come together. And so this is important for us to understand this. Now, in this research, in this study this week, I come across, and normally in this is segment, it's all dialogue, lesson, and conversation and study from the book. One of the things that I found in research was that there was another or greater sympathetic ear that in and it's not mentioned in this book, but it's mentioned in the video I found, that talked about the origins of African spirituality. And I said, well, it'd be a good time to, because we're at the time in this place in the book where We're about to move off of dealing with the spiritual realm of the foundation of African spirituality with got the physical realm and the spiritual realm. We're separating, and we're going to be talking about more of man's existence on earth and how Africans see man's encounter with African spirituality. And so I came across something that had the sympathetic ear, which is the Encyclopedia of African Religion. This book is 800, no, well, yeah, 897 pages long. And so somewhere in the world, after of course, you think John and Beatty was writing, there were other individuals who have developed a sense of connection. These are African scholars now, pure African scholars creating and developing African studies. And the brother we're going to listen to or learn from, not listen to, but learn from today in terms of his writings, was one of the first, created the first program for Africana studies, where we're now trying to take African spirituality and actually look at the real influences it had on not just the culture in which we live in, but on the new realities of faith, Christianity and Islam, which are the two youngest faiths or spiritual systems developed from ancient African wisdom. And so we have an a library called the People's Library, and I haven't advertised it on here, but I will soon, because there's nothing on the People's Library that gives us an understanding of African spirituality, and I looked it up and it wasn't there. However, on my version of the People's Library now has the 800 pages of the Encyclopedia of African Religion. It now has the 800 pages of it. So if you're looking for something with African spirituality and have questions about anything, it goes from A to Z, everything with a sympathetic ear, meaning that it studies the spiritual foundation of a people who created arts, science, mathematics, religion, agricultural sciences, everything, astronomy, numerology, it all came from us. And so you look for that sympathetic ear. Now, for us, we know by taking a look within the book in which, my community, we had a study in, and we're taking an academic approach because I said there's no written, there's no real written information in terms of what happened in terms of African spirituality. They didn't necessarily write it down. It was oral. Most of everything was oral. So now we have individuals of Africana studies who went back and had these conversations and put their conversations to ancient mystics and historians and different tribes, put it down on pen to paper so that we could learn more about ourselves. So as we in this African History Month, I tell everybody African history starts January 1st and ends December 31st, especially when you're conscious. They give us a month. I take the year. Why not? It's my right. But in this book, we learn, and this is a recap of everything, we learn about the monotheism, polytheism, and animism. And through and a half, hopefully, if you was watching in African history class, we talked about the Egyptian uh, spiritual system and realized that it was, it's a polytheism, you know, and it could be some animisms, no, like gods inside this, plants and mountains and animals and everything else. It's a soul consciousness and different things. It can go all the way. Africans created it all, and that's the concept of understanding that it all came from us. To be the first people on the planet is nothing. Everybody utilized something of us. And so we said that these are the different areas and levels, the three areas of forms of uh, spiritual systems: monotheism, one God; polytheism, multiple. You have one high God and multiple smaller gods, right? And then any animism, where you got spiritual energies and deities and in animals and things. And then you said that we said that, that they break this book, or the generalization of African spirituality is broken up in four categories: the Umtu, the Kintu, the Hantu, and the Kuntu. And the first one is anything with intellectual status: man, God, ancestors, spirits, anything that has intellectual capacity. The Kintu is everything below, or that everything that the Muntu has dominion over, right? The Hantu said it dealt with the area of time. And that area of time is called the Sasa, which is the now, or the Zamani, which is your past. It said man is moving towards not his future. You're not moving towards your future, you're moving towards your Zamani. Because they don't have a word for future. They don't see the future. They see that the most precious thing in life is what you do now. What did you do today? In knowing that we live in a religious universe, everything is divine because everything comes from God. And then in that, we went through the different areas of the book. And so that was the first half of the book. And then we went into the different chapters where we talked about the nature of God. The nature of God being no different than Christianity. God is all knowing, all seeing, and governs everything, all places at all times. The nature of God, right? And then we talked about God at work. And then God at work just dealt with the fact that God will sustain all that he creates. So if he created you, he's going to take care of you. He created plants. Photosynthesis says, I'm going to feed the plant. I got worms to feed the birds, right? I got big fish to eat off the little fish, and the little fish eat off a little fish, and the little fish eat the algae. I'm giving you what you need to sustain yourself, right? I bring the rains, I bring the storms, I make things grow. I give you cattle, right? The cattle eats the grass, I make the grass grow. Everything is a divine universe. There is nothing separate from it. God is always at work. He will take care of you. God works through you. He judges you. All of it. And so it dealt with that. And that's the understanding when we're taking a look. If you looked at uh, African history class and we talked about these civilizations, we understand that they believed that there was nothing separate from God, and they didn't take it for granted where I get to live free today and do whatever I want. No, God needs you to build upon the kingdom in which he calls you to create on his behalf to give him praise. Give her praise, right? So we can call God a she because she's a she and he's a he. No gender. We talked about the anthropomorphic vision of man, wherever he has to create everything in the image that he understands. We discussed nature and God and how Africans see God in everything: glass, water. As my brother Ade would say, that's God interacting with God. Why? Because God is what he creates. God is pure cosmic energy and creative intelligence. That water has the same energy that a plant has, that I have, that a rock has, cell phone has. Energy is in everything. And we talk about that in Akibaland Inspirational Sundays, where you'll see it. I need to create that in here so we can show you more often of what the other programs we have. If you only watch us during African spirituality class, and after this will be the last Sunday that I don't advertise all the programs during African spirituality, but because it is back to back, I figure you're triggered. But we're gonna not take that for granted anymore. Now, we also talked about the worship of God in African spirituality, and we talked about the sacraments and the offerings. Um, we talk about uh, and well, I'm about to skip to the next chapter. But all those things in terms of the sacraments and offerings, and the animals, the different colors, and the dancing and the songs, and the fact that there are special individuals that they said man may not even be worthy to speak to God. This is the need for the deities. This is the need for the ancestors. This is the need for the spirits. Why? Because giving God worship and praise, you need an intercedent to even reach the sacredness of the Creator. Mm, every man don't get that. And so in certain African communities and areas, there's a specialist that can speak to God on our behalf. Now, last week we talked about something different. We brought in the deities, the spirits, and what the writer John Mbiti said called the living dead. Now, that was the deities are any god under God. So they have them. And we discussed the ones from, let me see if I still got that up, and I do. I should. Yoruba deities. And they have tons of deities. Tons of deities. Uh, and a lot of things, and these are just some of the initial smaller gods. That of course there's just one God, but there are many multiple deities. We also discussed last week, and we shared it, and as we shared it last week, I brought it up again today, where in African history, because now at the same time we're studying um, Egyptian culture, but at the same time we're studying Egyptian culture, at the same time we're discussing in this book the deities, spirits, and the living dead, which is the ancestors, and I would call that the ancestral realm, right? And so we have those deities, and then boom, in the Egyptian culture, you have the deities and the high god, which is Ra, right? So we discussed those things, and we said that the spirits were uh, one, spirits created by God. Those are energies that will never be human, but can be possessed human. Like we got the spirit of fear, spirit of doubt, spirit of poverty, you know, spirit of joy. There's spirits. Then we have those entities who, or ancestors who are beyond 5 generations, who live beyond 5 generations, meaning that there is nobody on earth that remembers them, right? And so, because there's nobody on earth that remembers them, certain things happen or change, or uh, they fade into a spiritual realm, a deeper spiritual realm in between man and God, because it's always God, then it'll be a deity, then it'll be spirits, then it'll be ancestors, then it'll be man, which would be the hierarchy in an African spirituality, right? And so in the living dead, or you can call the ancestors, those are those individuals who transferred over, and there are still people on earth that remember them. Where they have a name, they remember their personalities, their favorite colors, what they look like, they're remembered. And so, with them being remembered, those are the ones that you can call on directly because they're here, because they haven't moved on to the spirit realm. They're in the ancestral realm. So there are two levels of realms inside the spiritual cosmology of African spirituality: the spirit realm and the ancestral realm. Wow. Yeah. So your ancestors are here. They're directly accessible. They're here for you. They knock on your door. But then you have those spirits who don't remember, but they're still connected to your line. And that's why in certain African cultures you will call on those ancestors that you remember and that you know, and then you ask them to call on the ones that you don't know and may have forgotten. And so then that brings about the relationship and connection, that maya. And this is what we've been talking about, that balance between the physical realm and the spiritual realm, that balance of life where African people were able to create great societies. Now in this space where we talking about the deities and discussing African culture, I was able to come up with and we have never had a scenario during African spirituality where we had a video that dived more in depth with the foundation of African spirituality and its contribution to the world. And so I found one, and of course, again, by our good brother, the home team. Um, And so we're going to share that and talk about that, because next week we're going to break off of dealing with the spiritual aspect of African spirituality and talk more about how does African spirituality view the man's existence in a religious universe. That's the rest of the book. So we at that breaking point where the focus of the book is going to change. And so I think that this is a great time to drop this video, and we'll talk about this video as we watch it. Let's continue.
There is no doubt that religion has permeated nearly all facets of human existence. No matter our belief system, we must acknowledge that the idea of singular or multiple deities has greatly influenced the trajectory of human civilization.
Now, already, between polytheism, monotheism, and animism, or monotheism, polytheism, and animism, however you want to rate them, they all came from African society. Doesn't matter, they all came from the same location or area. Now, they've all impacted the world greatly. Look at the impact that Egypt has on the world today, and they were polytheistic. Look at the impact that Christianity has in the world today, and they're monotheistic. The issue is not what's right or what's wrong. The issue is what good is created through mankind from the spiritual awareness. Let's continue.
Most scholars and scientists agree that humanity began in Africa, and so it would be a bit disingenuous to think that religion developed first outside of the African continent. And so today, I wanted to speak about what one scholar has to say concerning the origin of African religion. To begin, it's virtually impossible to point to any location in Africa and claim that this is a spot in which religion was first formulated. It's
Again, because individuals cannot say that I was there at that time. If you were watching African history class, we talked about how Egypt would create sacred mythology. So we can't say who started it first. What we can say, or what tribe started it first. What we can say, it wasn't African people that did it first. Know yourself. Let's continue.
really not that simple. One scholar named Deji Ayegboyan has a great article in the Encyclopedia of African Religion that covers this topic. I thought his ideas about the origin of religion in Africa was worthy of note, and so we'll be borrowing from his ideas primarily.
Now, one of the things that when I looked at Deji Ayoboyan, I actually pulled up him. I pulled up a sermon of his. Yeah, he's Christian. Let's get this straight. Deji Ayoboyan is Christian. However, where's it at? Where's my? Oh, I changed it. Okay, he's Christian. However, he did do a in this piece. Did I close my? No, I had something up where I had. There you go. Okay, there you go. Switch to this. Here you go. Okay, and so his input on this book was great. The section he has on his book is great. Now, when I pulled up the Encyclopedia of African Religion, wow, 897 pages. I said that's a lot of reading for me to do. And it details everything from a sympathetic eye, not condemning Africans, but uplifting their wisdom and their ability to connect themselves to the greater community or religious universe that's God's. All right, let me put this back and let's continue.
Most of this video will be a sort of philosophical sparring session between African history and the origin of religion, and thus should not be taken as an all-conclusive truth. I think what Deji Ayegboyan gives us is a foundation that can be used to study early African religion, a tangible outline we can build off of to understand the very concept of religion itself from an African perspective.
And it's important that you understand the word African perspective. That means he understands that the African world came first, that the European influence had no hold in it, that African knowledge and wisdom was given freely out to the rest of the world, and we have influenced the world around us. The African perspective or Pan African perspective or a black perspective is important in regards to looking at information. And this is why I always say you got to find a sympathetic ear. Because if you do not believe that we had anything to give the world, when you hear about Africans doing anything, they're going to tell you it's negative. They're going to tell you it's bad. They're going to tell you it's primitive, when it was what was created to build most civilizations. And they just took what they could understand and altered it to something that fit their more liking. That's Europeans. Let's continue.
Let's begin. A powerful fact that Deji Ayegboyin points out about the concept of religion in Africa concerns African languages itself. According to him, there aren't any words in African languages that refer to religion as a specific activity. He points out that the idea of religion is a borrowed concept coming from the influences of Europeans and Arabs.
So, with that, I'm going to say this. To Africans, it's a state of being, it's a state of living, it's a state of. When you're in balance with everything, there is no force. Europeans and Asians were using religion to control mindsets. Africans said, this is just our way of life. That's why we stated in the beginning, if there are 4,200 different tribes in Africa, there's 4,200 different ways to view spirituality. People say that I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I say I'm religious and spiritual. Why not? Because I get double the power. There you go. Let's continue.
Question of polytheism or monotheism is not an African question and has limited value in trying to understand how Africans came to view their lives and those of their neighbors. One does not have to draw sharp distinctions between those who believe in many deities and those who purport to believe in one deity to gain an appreciation of the complexity of the African way of life. In fact, most Africans accept a belief in one creator deity, although there may be many spirits. Thus, in reality, this is similar to the later forms of religion, which follow the African pattern in many respects.
Again, it seems like everything follows the African pattern, the African way, the influence of Africa. And so it doesn't matter, when we spoke on it in African history class, it said it doesn't matter how you, whether it's monotheistic or if it's polytheistic. What did you create with it? What did your people, not you as an individual person, but what did your people who believe in a faith as a group create from it? Because we can find African empires that influence even now. And we talked about that, how the pyramid is on every dollar bill. And they said the pyramid was God coming out of the abyss of nothingness. What? And so they have that on every dollar bill. So it's what level can your spirituality influence a greater community or traditions that bind us together? Seems like Africa is all in European society, and they don't want you to know it because they use religion as a tool to oppress. So then we can also use religion as a tool to set us free. Yeah, let's keep talking.
Now, Professor Deji doesn't elaborate further on this particular quote, but I imagine he may be speaking about how monotheistic religions such as Christianity and Islam worship one supreme deity, but still have lesser powerful entities such as angels or demons. Deji seems to suggest that though these religions are far removed, it still follows what he calls an African pattern. Before we go,
Now, there is nothing, no religion void of African influence. There's no faith void of African influence. Everything has it in it. And that's the part where we're talking about finding who we are in God, is defining your worth. And you can't find your worth without connecting it to your people and the greatness of your people, because you will find the greatness in you. And that is the reason, that is the importance of understanding African spirituality and the The earlier with World of Akibaland, the earlier we can get black youth to see this, to experience this, the earlier we can get that done, the more powerful we'll be able to have a generation that will be able to influence the planet as a whole. Think about it.
Go more in depth with African religion, there are some useful scholarly speculations about why religion came to be in the first place. Deji Ayekboyan discusses some of these general theories and applies them to African people. These theories include psychological, intellectual, emotional, and others. Proponents of the psychological theory claim that early Africans created gods or supernatural beings as a result of ignorance, fears, and anxiety. The intellectual theory maintains that early Africans were trying to make sense of the world around them. I find the emotional theory to be the most interesting. Emotional theorists propose that religious beliefs arose from emotions. They maintain that early African religion was not something thought out, but rather danced out to forestall the mounting of fear and anxiety in conditions where success is uncertain.
Now, when he said danced out, for first we did with the psychological reasons, men trying to make definition of who he is. If your faith is not giving you an understanding of who you are, culture, tradition, heritage, if it's not your faith, it's not a faith. Stripping black people from their culture, from their history, and from their names and origins takes us from the experience of a spiritual universe. Putting that back in gives it right back to us and helps us align ourselves to what we are should be doing in this modern day versus looking behind us and seeing how well they did with what they knew and how well they influenced the world around them. Now, this emotional thing where it said that the understanding of spirituality was danced out. I'll say this because this was not put in the book that we're studying, but and this is one of the things I have upset with the book, and maybe in the future chapters it'll go how Africans or African Americans or Africans of or the African diaspora, how we give praise with everything we got. We don't know how not to surrender everything in which we are to the process of giving praise. There's a big difference the way we dance out our spirituality versus everybody else. Now, when you get a European who can sing like a African or someone of African descent, that's a rarity. So it's some extra melanin somewhere in your DNA that turned on that gene, because that's rare. Because you don't do it like we do it. And so that's a part of who we are. We danced everything out of us to connect to a world we didn't understand. And we still do it the same way in almost everything we do. It's got to have a flair to it. Why? Because it's how we express the God in us. And we don't know how to turn that part of our DNA off. Some people do are born without any rhythm in their movements, in the cadence of their voices, but they all have rhythm in their work ethic. Think about it. Let's continue.
According to Deji Ayekboyan, if we conceptualize so-called African religion as simply an extension of a particular African ethnic group's way of life, instead of a separate identity altogether, as we sometimes do in the West, then the origins of African religion become a little less vague, morphing into a philosophical utility that holds more weight. It appears that the idea of responding to the environment, relationships, and mysteries might have occurred so far in antiquity that we will never know the precise origin of human response to the universe. Nevertheless, these early attempts to explain the environment may be called the origins of religion when defined as a way of life.
Now, the idea of responding to the environment. When did man begin to respond to the things around him, interact with it or engage. And when he did, because you can't pick that, because when you get that and he's trying to understand this spiritual thing, what we do know, according to the writings in the book, we do know that Africans, for the dating back to as far as man can remember and are willing to acknowledge, that we are in a spiritual universe and all things are connected. You can't erase science from this. Science and religion. Yes. I will tell you that there are scholars that say science and mathematics is the language in which God chooses to speak to man. Because the more we understand in science, the more we understand how God manifested things that he was able to manifest in the world. We know that if anything on the periodic table, and if you were part of Keeble Inspirational Sunday, any element on the periodic table, which is that scientific table in the thing of chemistry, was changed to 100,000th of a percent, the universe wouldn't exist. Meaning that God created the world in perfect mathematical symmetry. Perfect mathematical symmetry. So that means it was perfectly created for us to be here for the purpose of understanding what it says relationships. So he said, when did man want to understand the relationships and the mysteries around him? What he found out is that he exists in that balance of that within the universe. That's ancient antiquity. We don't know the date. We know that the first man was came out of Africa. Africa is the cradle of life, and all started there. And when we look at Kemet from African history class, how all in Kush, all the nations around was borrowing off of their understanding and their wisdom. Let's continue. Even in um, Egyptian mythology, there was a season where Greece took over Egypt. And in that mythology, they infused, they said, well, wow, this is great foundation. Can we infuse Greek mythology inside Egyptian mythology just so that we could be a part of it? And they did just that. And that's when Kush was like, we're going to get y'all out of here because we're not doing this. But it was a unified universe, and they saw themselves as a unified universe. Let's continue.
I think the one thing we can point to concerning the origin of religion that's tangible is the origin of monotheism. There does seem to be some direct documentation that speaks to the concept of one God, documentation that points in one location, and it began on the African continent. Africans were the first humans to conceive of a concept of monotheism, and Akhenaten has been considered the first person to have commented on the idea of one God. Of course, there is ample evidence to know.
So, even that concept does not go to Europeans. Ain't that something? There is but one God. Akhenaten said that, yeah, there's only a supreme deity, and that's a concept looks like a pharaoh, where he tried to change the traditions of saying we're gonna give one God praise and that's it. And so again, Christianity and Islam is but an infant of ancient African wisdom, and that's the part we embrace and we come to understand. It would behoove us as a people to continue to find the comparisons and the links of African spirituality inside our Christian and his Muslim faiths, because that's exactly where they come from. Islam is not a faith of the Middle Eastern. It's a faith of the continent, and its roots are African. The same way that Christianity is not a faith of Catholicism. No, they had to take it over. Greeks did and the Romans did. But it is rooted in African history and spirituality, traditions, and culture.
That many African traditions accepted that the supreme deity was too distant to deal with daily issues. These were left for the interventions of ancestors and other spirits.
Now, God is too distant. The people that always ask the question, why did God do this? Why did God do this? Why did God do this? Of course, God knows all things. But they said when speaking to God, with God, interacting with God, there's a distance between God and man if God is governing the whole universe. Now, of course, we can access God, the wisdom of God, the guidance of God, the intelligence of God, the power of God, all accessible. But in African understanding, they said it's been a distance between man and God for so long that man needs intercedents, individuals who intercede on behalf of his desire. And so when you speak or you do ancestral veneration, that's all it is building the relationships between man and the deities or entities that are in between man and the creator. So with COVID happening and a lot of people transitioning over, blend those relationships, blend those connections, and blend and cultivate the relationships with those who have gone before and also those who will come after. Because spirituality is an example, shows of what man manifests in his life. He said it doesn't matter what your faith is. I'm a Christian. I'm a Pan African Orthodox Christian. Do I have a particular African sect a tradition that I follow? Absolutely. We'll talk about my church later. We'll talk about my African tradition later. We're trying to get now in a space where we are dealing with the understanding of African spirituality as a whole. And so hopefully this was able to bless you.
Even though we cannot conclusively say African religion began here or there, I think we can begin challenging our own paradigms on religion and rethink how we view the concept of religion on the African continent. I think at the very least, Deji Ayegboyin has helped us to dispel our assumptions about the question itself.
Now, to believe that we gave the world African religion, we gave the world African religion. We gave the world spirituality. We gave the world the concept of God. We gave the world the concept of ancestors. We gave the world of the concept that of relationship between man and nature and man in the spiritual universe. This is who we are. This is what we should celebrate in our spirituality. This is that important. Hopefully, like he said, that this gives you a reason or a means to look at your faith a little bit deeper, a little bit wiser, a little bit more connectedness. Because if you see God in everything, that definitely changes your behavior. Wow. And again, I'll sit down and add this is the book that we're studying. We'll go into chapter 9 next week, which is The Origins of Man. And this is the book that from the video, the Encyclopedia of African Religion. I downloaded it myself, where Deji Ayobui put his thoughts, and where you have a collection of individuals who are studied on Africana studies and put together the concepts so that we can get a better understanding of who and whose we are as being individuals of the African diaspora. So not only celebrate your African history for the fact that we fought ourselves up from slavery, but for the fact that we're fighting ourselves back to an awareness of who we are in the Creator. And with that being said, I wish you all a blessed day. One love.